Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. We are in chapter 38. This is part 2, meaning chapter 38b, and this one is called Homecoming. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim shabechu kol haumim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam hallelujah. And Jacob took his sons and his sons' sons and his wives, and he went to Kiryat Arba to his father Isaac. So we're continuing now with Jacob's journey home, hence homecoming, yeah? So there's a question here regarding the information, since the tribes were very young, as Reuben was no more than 15 years old at the time, right? So how could Jacob have had grandsons? Well, they married young, and Reuben very easily could have had a couple of kids at this point, but the majority of the marriages and the grandkids all happened before they sold Joseph. In other words, once everybody had all the kids that they needed to have, except for Yehudah, as we know, that's when Joseph was sold. So in other words, this all had to happen first before they sold him. Everybody had to sort of be established, except for Judah. There had to be a tikkun over there. So Jacob came with his camp to Isaac. And lo and behold, he found Esav and his wives sitting in Isaac's tent. Hey, brother. How your teeth doing? Our books say that Jacob did not actually come to dwell within Isaac's camp within his tent, obviously, but rather they set up camp elsewhere, which we're going to see in just a minute, what our text says. Now, Jacob is only bringing his family to pay their respects to Isaac. He finally came back to the land of Canaan, right? Meaning they went to visit Grandpa. Just a nice short visit. So as our text continues and says, and he, meaning Jacob, pitched his tent outside, away from Esav. There was no danger about Esav polluting, if you will, or bringing Tuma into Isaac's tent, because Esav actually is one of his merits was that he was known to have Kibud Av Va'em, the fifth command in the 10 Commandments. Esav had a tremendous respect for his father and mother. He would never bring idolatry into his parents' tent. In fact, when he went out and he chose a wife from the nations, he saw that it bereaved his parents. That's why he went to, and he married the daughter of Ishmael, Machelet Bat Ishmael, to please his parents. Ishmael did the same thing. They had Kibud Av and Em for the most part. So again, he did this. So Jacob set up shop in a place called Migdal Eder, which literally means or translates as the tower of the flock. Migdal, tower, Eder, flock. And he did this right after they buried Rachel. So we have all the wars that took place between the sons of Jacob. Like I said, they were teenagers and they destroyed the land of Canaan. Rachel passed, and then they came to see Isaac. And where'd they come? Rachel died. She was buried on the way to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem, right? Bethlehem and then Ephrat, Hebron. It's all within the same vicinity over there. And Jacob erected a pillar over her grave, which is a pillar of the tomb of Rachel, until this very day. And Jacob continued and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder, the tower of the flock, the place from whence it is to be that King Messiah will be revealed at the end of days. There are obviously many understandings of how Mashiach is going to arrive, but this place is close to Hebron, meaning within the boundaries of Judah. One of the options is that in order to not only cleanse the land and prepare for the coming of God, Mashiach will go through the 4 spiritual cities of Israel, starting with Tzafat all the way up north, representing air. Tiberias, moving a little bit more south, representing water, right? The Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret. Going down to Hebron, representing earth. And then, of course, ending in Jerusalem, representing fire. Yerushalayim shel Zahav. Gold is a sign of judgment. Jerusalem always was and will be the city of judgment. This is where God is going to come and judge the whole world from. And you did hear me correctly in that the job of Messiah is but to prepare the people for the unification of God and the Shekhinah. Messiah doesn't save. That is not his job. His job is to help the people do tshuva and direct them to God. And Isaac saw Jacob and his wives, and his sons and daughters, and his heart was very much filled with joy. Oh, finally, nachat, right? Now, whose heart was filled with joy? Well, we are speaking of Isaac, so we can chalk up all the obvious, but he hasn't seen his son for 22 years. And now he sees 3 generations, right? That will make any father proud. But Jacob is also filled with joy over here, beyond the obvious of missing his father for 22 years. Jacob made a deal with God, remember? And God delivered. And at the perfect time, no less. When Jacob had the dream, remember back in Genesis 28, so we'll read verse 21, he said, "And if I return in peace to my father's house, and the Lord will be my God. Vishavti beshalom el beit avi," specifically to the house of my father. Not only my father, but also Abraham is also called father. Like we said, a grandfather is also called the father. Va'aya Hashem li le'elohim. Peace is the hint towards God fulfilling his pact. Watch this. This is beautiful. Right after Joseph is born, God says the following to Jacob in Genesis 31:3. "And the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your forefathers, shuv el eretz avotecha," meaning Avraham and Yitzchak, "and to your birthplace, and I will be with you. Vayomer Hashem Yaakov shuv el eretz avotecha ulemoladetcha," where you were born, "ve'yeh imach," and I will be with you. Now, this happened right after Joseph was born. Again, read Genesis 31, all right? What does peace or shalom have to do with Joseph? Numbers 25. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, Aaron the Kohen, has turned my anger away from the children of Israel by his zealousy, avenging me among them, so that I did not destroy the children of Israel because of my zeal. Therefore say, I hereby give him my covenant of peace. Lachen emor, hineni," God, "noten lo," to Pinchas, "et briti shalom." Brit, my covenant of peace. "It shall be for him," meaning specifically for Pinchas, who is also Eliyahu. "It shall be for him and for his descendants after him as an eternal covenant of kehuna, Brit kehunat olam, because he was zealous for his God and atoned for the children of Israel. Tachat asher kino le'elohav, kine le'elohav, ve'chaper al bnei Israel." Okay, Malachi 2:5. "My covenant was with him, life and peace. Briti haita ito, hachaim vehashalom." Who did God just give his covenant of peace to? We read it specifically to Pinchas. "And I gave them to him with fear, and he feared me, and because of my name, he was overawed." It says, "Va'etnam lo mora va'yeraeni mipnei shmi nichathu." Now, Pinchas is Elijah, and he said in 1 Kings 19:14, and he said, "I have been zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant." Right? "Vayomer kano kineti la Hashem Elohei tzavaot ki azavu britecha." Again, we see Israel, he's saying that Israel is abandoning the Brit. And of course, God says, no, there's still 7,000 that did not bow the knee, right? The covenant, though, the covenant is the Brit, meaning what? Meaning the circumcision very specifically. Why did God give him the Brit? Because it was the Brit that was being violated with Zimri and with Cosby. Yet Pinchas rectified that, right? So I believe we've covered this plenty of times. But since Pinchas, or Elijah's zeal, was towards the covenant, like we said, i.e. upholding sexual immorality, he was then tasked with being present and overseeing every single Brit or circumcision until the end of time as we know it. That's why in every time we have a Brit, we have a Kiseh Eliyahu, a chair of Elijah, because he is there, at least in spirit, to oversee the covenant that he was so zealous to keep. So he said when he was Pinchas, and then he said again when he was Elijah. So God said, till the end of time, this is now your responsibility. Okay. Great. Now, what does all this have to do with Joseph? As we know, Joseph represents the Sephira of Yesod, foundation. And this sphera corresponds with the Brit on our body, right? We have Chesed, Avraham, Gevurah, Yitzchak, Tiferet, Yaakov, Netzach, Moshe, Netzach, Aaron, Hod, Moshe, Yesod, Yosef, Malchut, David. That's the feet, that's the ground, right? So specifically, the Sephira of Yesod, foundation, corresponds to the Brit, meaning our man parts, if you will. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov Avinu, like we said, Moses. So these are their titles. Avram Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, also Moses is known as the prophet, who's Adon Lechol HaNeviim. He's the master of all the prophets, part of our 13 Zechirot that we say every day. The 13 principles of our faith. Aaron is the Kohen. David is the king. David HaMelech, Aaron HaKohen. And Yosef, what is Yosef's title? Yosef HaTzadik. Right? So the title Tzadik goes specifically with Yosef. As said in Proverbs 10, when the whirlwind passes, the wicked man is no more, but the righteous is the foundation of the world. Ka'avol sufa ve'ein rasha, ve'tzadik yesod olam. Meaning that the world can be held up by even a single man who does not break said covenant. Joseph held himself at the age of 17 years old, and as a result, he became the savior of the world. Again, we've discussed this. How many 17-year-old kids do you know would be able to withstand what Joseph did? And it wasn't just one time, it was every single day for a year that Potiphar's wife changed 3 outfits every single day. And she became physically ill because she was rejected by him time and again. Finally, she tried to seize the moment, right? And he had to call upon his father and his forefathers. That's why we have the Vayimayin, and above the word Vayimayin, meaning he paused, the Vayimayin, there is a Shalshelit. It's like a squiggly line of 3 squigglies, 1, 2, 3. Why is it called Shalshelit? Comes from the word shalosh, 3, and shalsheret, chain, meaning a 3-pronged chain. Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He had to call upon them for help because he was about to fall. We're only human after all. We can try the best that we can, but there's a moment that we have to ask for assistance, and of course God is going to grant it to us, as he did. But before Joseph, there was another lone savior of the world who also held himself from sexual immorality in a time where the entire world fell. Genesis 6:9. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfect. Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav. And so you see, so if Joseph is known as a tzaddik, right here in the Torah, God is saying that Noach was a tzaddik. What do they have in common? You see what I'm saying? And so when Joseph was born, the Yesod was descending to the world, and the covenant of peace with which Jacob prayed for was being established. All this concluding with God bringing him back to his father's house in peace. The covenant is in play. You see what I'm saying regarding Noah? Why was Noach ish tzadik tamim haya bedorotav? Because in his generation, every single person in the entire world, except for his 3 sons and his wife, and questionably even their 3 wives, kept themselves separate. But it all started with him. And at that point also there was Metushelach, one of the tzaddikim, but he obviously passed that torch to Noach. Once the torch was passed to Noach officially, that is when he left this world. 7 days later, they sat Shiva for him. And then after the 7 days of Shiva, boom, that's when the flood took place. So because Noach kept himself, he was called a tzaddik. So we see Shalom, the Brit, and the Brit and tzaddik are all connected to the covenant. What is the covenant? Specifically, the Brit Milah, that which Abraham was commanded, and Isaac was the first. And why? What's the difference between Isaac and Ishmael? Ishmael was born to a man that did not have the Brit. Abraham, right? Ishmael did a Brit when he was 13 years old. But Isaac was the first guy in the world to have ever been born and produced from a man who had this covenant in place. That's why the promise goes to Isaac and not to Ishmael. Okay. And Isaac saw Jacob and his wives, and his sons and daughters, and his heart was very much filled with joy. For of him it is written in Psalms 128:6, and may you see children born to your children, peace upon Israel. Ure banim levanecha, shalom al Israel, literally peace upon Israel, meaning upon Jacob. Prophecies being fulfilled, written. God is true to his word, you see? And we see it over and over again throughout the Torah. I love it. This gets me all verklempt. Okay, Rabbi Levi says, when it was time for Isaac's gathering, meaning when he passed away, he left his livestock and his possessions and all that he had, everything, all his physical possessions, everything, the land, everything, to his two sons. Well, minus the land, okay? Because that actually wasn't necessarily his. That would obviously go to Jacob. It did go to Jacob. Esav received the land of Seir, but now we're talking about his possessions. When Abraham was gathered, it said in Genesis 25:5, and Abraham gave all that he possessed to Isaac. And this is right before we read the very next verse, meaning in 25:6, that says, and to the sons of Abraham's concubines, Abraham gave gifts, and he sent them away from his son Isaac while he, Abraham, was still alive, eastward to the land of the east. This is why, again, you will see a lot of things that are reminiscent of the mitzvot that we have in the Torah in India, in China, and in these Far Eastern countries. Like we said, even in China, you see there's this very mysterious tradition that they put these black boxes on their foreheads, or where we wrap the, that's where you put the tefillin, obviously. Where we wrap the tefillin are very specific points for acupuncture on our arms. In other words, what we are doing triggers something spiritually, while what they are doing, it triggers something physically. Nevertheless, you see these points of origins. Everything in the Far East, people levitating, incantations, all these incredible things, where do you think they got it from? Abraham gave them gifts and sent them away from Isaac. Do your thing, but do it there. The Torah writes this specifically to show us that what truly counts as a possession is not livestock, riches, or anything worldly, but rather Isaac received that which is most important, the continuity of the seed of Abraham and the eternal blessings that come with it. Cows come and go, right? This is because Isaac was born to Sarah, and also, like we said, specifically born from a man who already had the covenant. But in our case, both the righteous and the wicked, in this case, were born to two righteous people, Isaac and Rivkah. They bore Esav, the wicked, and Jacob, the righteous. And Isaac, who is all about perfect justice, left it all to his two sons. Now, we're about to see how the distribution took place, although by now I really hope you guys know which direction it took. We've been discussing it, but this is where we're actually breaking it down. Not only since we have discussed this time and again over the past month, but because hopefully you are reading the same book as I am. So again, Rabbi Levi says, when it was time for Isaac's gathering, he left his livestock and his possessions and all that he had to his two sons. Therefore, they both repaid him with kindness, as says in Genesis 35:29. And Isaac expired and died, and was gathered into his people, old and sated with days, and his sons Esav and Jacob buried him. So, question is, why does our text write that they both repaid Isaac with kindness by burying him? Would it not be obvious that Jacob would do so? Like, of course Jacob would do so. So yes, it would be, but Esav, however, our sages say, that it was only because Isaac left them a significant sum that he buried his father. Otherwise, he would have bailed. So again, he did have a tremendous amount of respect for his father while his father was alive. You see? That's why I said, the moment my father's done, I'm going to go kill Jacob. In other words, you're done, that's it. Bury him, don't bury him. But part of, I guess, yeah, okay, you want all this stuff, put your father in the ground. Fine, I'll do it, right? So one is righteous, one is wicked, This is why it says they both repaid him with kindness, each for their own reasons. Jacob couldn't care less about his father's possessions. It was about paying respect to his father. Now, everything we discussed regarding what belongs to who is about to be very clear. Esau said to Jacob, let's divide everything that father left us into two, and I will choose since I'm the elder. Now, when I was a kid, my mom, and let's say there's a piece of whatever, and it was between me and my brother, Levi, right? My mom always said, okay, so this is how it goes. One of you divides and the other one chooses. That's the most fair, because then if the other one's choosing it, you're going to obviously divide it to the perfectly even to the best of your ability. Because if you do it, okay, here's the bigger piece and the smaller piece, you divide, he chooses, and so on. So you get the idea. But Esau is saying, okay, let us divide it, but really I'm going to divide it because I'm the older and I'm going to choose and I'm the older. They both know that Esau already forewent his blessings, but Jacob's like, yeah, no problem. We understand his rationale behind these things. Sure, take the stuff, but we'll see what went down, okay? So now you may be thinking, okay, that only makes sense since they both decide on the division, and naturally one must choose from what they both decided. But the way it's written here in the Hebrew hints towards the fact that not only will Esau choose first, but like we said, he's also going to be the one to make the division. Not fair at all. Remember, this is after Jacob paid off his brother, making him a very wealthy man in his own right. Jacob said, this wicked one's eye is not satisfied from the wealth, as it says in Ecclesiastes 4:8. There is one, and there is no second. Yea, he has neither son nor brother, and there is no end to all his toil, neither is his eye sated from wealth. This is where it comes from. Now for whom do I toil and deprive my soul of pleasure? This too is vanity and an unhappy affair. The more we have, the more we want. And this, generally speaking, goes across the board when it comes to wealth and power and influence, right? You can never have enough, because at some point it's like, so who are you going against here, right? Now you have $100 million. Now you have $100 billion. Do you want another $50 billion? What is the actual difference between $100 billion and $150 billion, for instance? What can you do here that you can't do there? Nothing. It's not about that. It's about right here what Solomon says. Neither is his eye sated from wealth. The more you have, you're always going to want more by default, unless you are truly living like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to which case God kept on giving them. They didn't pursue it. God is the one that kept on giving them. Why? Because they're the ones that were distributing it. And that's how it works, by the way. So what did Jacob do? How does Jacob give the wicked man everything he wants? He divided everything into two parts. Everything his father left in, Jacob's like, okay, how about this? Everything his father left into one part, meaning all the money, the cattle, the flock, the servants, all the wealth, all the possessions of Isaac, that's one. And the land of Israel into the other part. So here you have it. All the money and the wealth in the world on one hand, and the land of Israel, which is complete, or at that point, the land of Canaan, which is completely overrun by hostile and idolatrous Canaanites. Massive, idolatrous, hostile Canaanites, right? So we're about to see what was truly important to Jacob. What did Esau do? He went to see Ishmael in the desert and to be crowned by him. So the word for crowned here is lehimalech. You hear the word melech, lehimalech, to be crowned king, right? However, our understanding from this within this context is that he went to consult and not necessarily to be crowned. This was a smart move after all, since Ishmael was now, he was the son of Abraham, right? So this was a smart move, since Ishmael is not only Abraham's son, but also the father-in-law of Esau, as he married Machelet, the daughter of Ishmael. Like we said, this is how their families united. Furthermore, Ishmael had already died way before Isaac. We know this. We could read this. And so it wasn't Ishmael per se who Esav went to see, but rather the sons of Ishmael, also known as Ishmael. Today, when we say Ishmael, we're not talking about the son of Abraham, we're talking about the Arabs. As written in Genesis 28:9, so Esav went to Ishmael, and he took Malatach, Mahalath, right? That's Machelet in Hebrew. Vaikachet Machelet bat Ishmael, the daughter of Ishmael, the son of Abraham, the sister of Nevayot, al nashav lo leisha, in addition to his other wives as a wife. And by the way, what Esav did right here is very dangerous, and he knew it. In a sense, he united the two nations, becoming subservient to Ishmael, because Ishmael is now your father-in-law. Hence, he is your father, if you will. This is why the Christians and the Muslims kept on fighting over the land of Israel over years, right? Neither able to retain it indefinitely, since it doesn't belong to either one of them. And look who is here right now. Despite everything, and yes, all the plans and everything of the powers that be, despite everything, you got 2.2 billion Muslims in the world and 2.6 billion Christians. You got about 15 million Jews. You see the difference over there? Now tell me, it's not by God that we are here. Anyway, the Torah mentions Nebayot, Esav's brother-in-law, who likely took over for his father as the head of the tribe, and who Esav is likely seeking counsel with. Ishmael said to Esav, the Amorites and the Canaanites are sitting in the land. Now let's just make something clear here for a moment, okay? First it was 10 when God said, and you'll come to the land of this and that. There's 10. And then 7, and then 3 nations are mentioned within the land of Canaan. These are all Canaanites, right? All of those nations, they're all Canaanites. Why? Because they're within the land of Canaan. That's why they're called Canaanites, even though they're different nations. There is no Canaanite nation but the land of Canaan. You understand? Okay. The reason our text mentions specifically the Amorites is because they were the most feared. Let's read what God said of them in Amos 2:9. And I destroyed the Amorites from before them, whose height is as the height of the cedar trees, and they are as strong as oaks, and I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots from below. In other words, there are no more Amorites in the land of Israel. Joshua concluded that task, right? Jacob started it, where he told Joseph, I'm giving you a double portion, because from what I took from the Amorites with my bekashtiu bechalbi, with my sword and my bow, he started the fight. Joshua, who was from the seed of Ephraim, i.e. Mashiach ben Ephraim, concluded it when he defeated the 31 Amorite kings. And you could read this, I believe this is Joshua 10, where that's where the sun and the moon stood still, Shemesh begivon dom, ve'ach be'emek ha'elon, Halo iktuva b'sefer ha'yashar, for it is written in the book of Jasher. Read the book of Jasher. All the details of the wars are over there. So they were a nation of giants, as big as cedars and as strong as oaks. Said Ishmael to Esav, go ahead, give him this land, no worries. And Jacob believes he is going to inherit the land, says our text. Meaning, really? He believes it? Let him, said Ishmael to Esav. But rather, take what your father has left behind, and Jacob will end up with nothing. Jacob and his teenagers, they're not going to, sure, don't worry about it. Take all the stuff and go. So you see, they may have been focusing on what Isaac promised Jacob, but they didn't care about what God promised Jacob. This land is yours. So Esav took everything. By the way, we see everything surrounding the land of Israel. Everything surrounding the land of Israel. Our parshat this week, right? Between Ki tetzeh milchama al oivecha and Ki tavo next week, when you come into the land. The mitzvot of the Torah, most of them are dependent upon the land of Israel. Again, I tell you, why there are not Orthodox Jews living here, all of them, is beyond my comprehension. But what does give me comfort is that you could read it in the prophecies, and it's not going to look good for them. Because when you have an opportunity to come to Israel and you don't, for whatever honestly, really for whatever reason, you have to be a very special individual to not be there. Sent by a very specific mission from God to not be in the land of Israel, as there are only 3 reasons why you should not be in the land of Israel. Torah, Parnasa, finding a wife. That's it. You can have Parnasa in Israel. There's plenty of nice Jewish girls here too. Tell me you can't learn Torah in Israel. It drives me nuts, and my heart weeps for my brethren who are outside, because when everything shuts down, and we know it is, their fate will be as the nations. Why didn't you come here? Because my local rabbi said, there's no excuse for this. None. But I digress. It's hard not to get into that. So Esav took everything his father left behind, and the land of Israel and the cave of Machpelah he gave to Jacob. Jacob gave up all the wealth of this world for the land of Israel, i.e. the land of Canaan, the land of giants, hostile giants. The reason the cave of Machpelah is mentioned is because of Esav's desire to not only own it, but to be buried there as well, as we can read how that played out in the book of Jasher, right? When the sons of Jacob all came from Egypt, including all of Egypt, when they came to bury Jacob in the cave of Machpelah, then Esav and his entire family blocked them from doing so. They were delaying putting the tzaddik in the ground until Esav was then decapitated and his head rolled into the cave of Machpelah, and it is there until this very day. Like we said, you go inside there, you have the Avot and 3 of the Imaot. Their tombs are over there, and then you have one tomb who looks identical to the others with no name on it. That's the head of Esav. And they wrote an eternal contract between them. As soon as their business was concluded, Jacob pulled a Clint Eastwood and said, "Now, get off my land." That's it. Amar lo Yaakov le'esav, lech me'eretz achuzati me'eretz Canaan. Done, signed, sealed, delivered, witnesses, everybody signing. Get off my land, said Jacob to Esav. Be gone from my inheritance from the land of Canaan. And Esav took his wives and all that was his, which was everything. Jacob agreed, they agreed, as said in Genesis 36:6. And Esav took his wives, his sons, and his daughters, and all the people of his household, and his cattle, and all his animals, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan. And he went to another land because of his brother Jacob. That's the deal. You want everything, get out of the borders. Vayelech el eretz, another land, mipnei Yaakov achiv. Now look how God rewards even the wickedest man, because they deserve a reward for the smallest thing that they might do. Remember, he has no place in the world to, He has no place in the world to come, so he gets it in this world, right? In the world to come, when a wicked man lives a wicked lifestyle, no place in the world to come. But if they do something good in this world, that's where they get their rewards. Nothing in the world to come. God pays everybody exactly according to their due. So even wicked people do good sometimes. And since Esav cleared all his belongings for his brother Jacob, yeah, you're going to say, well, they agreed upon it. Wait. And this is our text that writes this. And since Esav cleared all his belongings for his brother Jacob, 100 provinces were given to him from God, from Seir until Magdiel. So again, you might be thinking, well, of course he cleared out. They made a deal, did they not? 2 things. 1, do some of the most wicked people in the history of the world have a reputation of keeping their word? In this case, he did. 2, the commentators say that if he wouldn't have cleared all his belongings, there would be nothing that Jacob could do to stop him or to force him to do this. But he did it anyway, down to the last vessel, because everything from Esav, even his vessel is impure, had to be taken out of the land. Down to the last vessel, thereby completely ridding himself from the land of Canaan. As said in Genesis 36:43, Aluf Magdiel, Aluf Iram, says our text. Chief Magdiel, Chief Iram. And Chief Iram, it says, this is Romi. Romi is a hint leaning towards Caesarea, the city of Caesar, meaning it's not big Rome, it's small Rome. So, once all this takes place, and Esav, his family, his people, and all his belongings leave the land, then Jacob dwelt securely and in peace, meaning laid back in the land of Canaan and in the land of his father's dwelling, as it is written in Genesis 37:1, Jacob dwelt in the land of his forefathers sojourning in the land of Canaan, thereby fulfilling God's word and promise to Jacob that he would be with him in the house of Lavan and on the road, and finally returning him home to the land of Canaan and to the city of Hebron, where his fathers Isaac and Abraham dwelt and were buried in peace. Thus concludes our teaching for this week. Please stay tuned for next week's class, as you know what comes next. So as always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and have Shabbat Shalom. Bye.